Diversity, equity, and inclusion. A topic over the last few years has really flourished. We've had so many conversations. However, what's coming to light is that there's a huge fear of saying the wrong thing, a huge fear of not knowing which terminology to use, not knowing what to say. And that fear is preventing us from truly driving change, from truly creating environments that have that psychological safety and that sense of inclusion. And that fear spans across the world. There's so many different elements that create that. There's different languages, different cultures. So how do we communicate in a way where we have that psychological safety, to share ideas, to share different opinions? And the beauty of diversity is that we don't all need to think the same. We can think differently, but still respect each other's different opinions. I want to share with you an example. One of the questions I get asked very often is, where are you from? So I usually say, West London. And then I get a follow-on question, which is, no, where are you from? And then I say, Uxbridge in West London. And then you get this standoff situation, a bit like a Western movie, where we're looking at each other, someone's waiting for who's going to make the next move. Now, the truth is, that's an uncomfortable situation. It creates conflict. We want to get to a place where we can learn and grow, right? Where someone can share or ask a question without that fear. So that learning is critical to creating that psychological safe space. But what do? Right? I'm human. I want to ask the same questions. I'm inquisitive about different cultures, different people, different backgrounds. What I tend to do is create psychological safety for myself. I go into that same question, and what I usually say is, I'm really intrigued to learn a bit more about your background, about your heritage. I'm not sure what the right way of asking is, but I'm going to ask how I know. And if I get it wrong, please do correct me, because I'm on a learning journey. And that's it, that's psychological safety, right? If I get corrected, I don't feel that conflict situation. I'm happy to correct myself. And it actually creates comfort for the other individual to be able to correct me. But one of the things that we must measure in these conversations is intent and impact. Now, I see the world from a very positive light. I think people have good intent, and sometimes, even though the intent's good, the impact of their words is negative. Those are occasions when we can actually learn and grow, when someone's intent is positive, but the impact might be negative. And there's examples of that in a group meeting, when we're having a discussion, when someone says something with good intent, but it might land in a negative way because it's not placed using the right language, or it might not be culturally coming across in the right way. We can learn and grow. And of course, there is occasions when someone's intent is negative and the impact of their words is negative. And in those occasions, we must correct. We must actually address it there and then. And that's where this concept of calling in versus calling out comes up. Now, you've all heard of people being called out for saying the wrong thing, for getting it wrong. And that's right. There are occasions when we must call people out. When someone says something that's racist, sexist, homophobic, or any other form of discrimination, where it has an immediate impact on a person, on a group, there's harm that's directly targeted at someone. At that occasion, we must call out that behavior. We must stand up and be those active allies, actively standing up for what is right. But many occasions, we could call people in. When people say something without ill intent, when they're trying to ask something and you know their intent might not be negative, that's an opportunity to actually call someone in. But what does calling in actually mean or entail? Well, that's where you pull the person aside and take it as an opportunity to educate them, to give them that learning opportunity to understand that actually the term you used is not the relevant one anymore. Or the way you said that, it might have had a negative impact. Try this next time. Why is that important? Why is it important to call someone in? Well, if you call someone out, 99.9% of the time, they still hold those views, but will just never express them again. And that's dangerous, because we want people to learn. We want people to have a different perspective. We want them to adjust the way they converse or the things they think. And that's why calling in is so important. Now, on many occasions, you could be on the receiving end of being called out or called in. What do you do then? Well, the first thing is, we as humans, the moment someone challenges us, our immediate response is defensiveness. We become defensive. We try to justify what we've said. The truth is, if someone does call you out or call you in, you must take that as a learning opportunity, with an open mind to be able to listen to them, to be able to understand what they're saying. And that brings me really to the point around psychological safety. Now, psychological safety is fundamental to any organization, any group of friends, any societal conversation. You must have psychological safety. If you're truly going to advance your learning, your understanding, and create a safe space, a space where people can bring their authentic self, not where they have to adapt, but where they have a sense of belonging. You have to create psychological safety. But how do you do it? And I'm going to share with you some examples of things I've seen over the years that create psychological safety. This is not the ultimate list, but it's a starting point around things that each and every one of us can do to create that psychological safety. The first is, before we go into conversations, how do we set the expectations? How do we set the expectations around what we're discussing, what we're planning, the foundations of what we're going to learn or what we're going to converse? That is so, so important. Because usually we go into a conversation without doing any of that, whether it's in a work setting or in a personal setting. And unless the individual knows you really well, it can go wrong because we interpret things in different ways. So setting those expectations is fundamental. The second is about being open and explaining your why. We give a point of view. You share an idea. Do you ever think about what the why behind it is? What is your why for sharing that? And that why is so powerful because we must explain our why. It gives people context into our thinking, into why we believe in what we're saying. So sharing a why is fundamental. The third piece is about understanding how do you give everyone a voice, especially in group settings. We've all been in group activities, meetings with a group of friends, and there's that one person who's always got the last word, who's always sharing what they think. But how do we create a level playing field? How do we create an environment where even the quiet people can speak up, where everyone feels they have that equity? And that is fundamental to learning and growth. If we're truly going to experience different ideas, different perspectives, we must create a learning environment, a psychologically safe environment, where every single person feels they can contribute, where we can turn around and ask everyone to share their views, not just one person. And that requires us to put a bit of effort, going around the room, asking that one person who might not have said anything, do you have anything to add? It's the small steps, the simple things that we do that create opportunities for learning and growth. The other key point is around active listening. When I was a young boy, my parents taught me one thing. You've got one mouth and 2 ears. Go into life talking and listening in that proportion. And I think it's still relevant. Talk less, listen more. How do we do that? How do we actively talk less, listen more? And the active listening piece, when someone gives you an idea, that's different. How do we ensure that we value that idea? We acknowledge it, because it's taken them courage to speak up and give you a perspective. So we must create that psychological safety where we understand the idea, we acknowledge it, and then we explore it and give feedback. That's so important. And then the final piece is really truly about diverse, equitable, and inclusive environments. If we're going to truly drive change in this space, we must create a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is a fundamental fact that environments that are more diverse, equitable, inclusive, and where people have a sense of belonging are much better to work in, to live in, but more importantly, you get better innovation, more creativity, better problem solving. If we all thought the same, if we adapt to group thinking, how are any new ideas ever going to be born? So we must create environments where people belong. And that's the critical piece around psychological safety. I want to acknowledge that conversations in the diversity space are uncomfortable. They're uncomfortable for everyone, especially when you're trying to learn about something that's different. But the truth is, we need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Why? Comfortable experiences don't last for a lifetime. Uncomfortable experiences do. If I asked any of you to think about a good, comfortable experience, how far back can you go? A day? A week? A month? Maybe a year? But if I asked you to reflect on an uncomfortable experience, I promise you, you could go back to your childhood. And that's the power of those experiences. The learning we derive from an uncomfortable experience lives with us for a lifetime. And that's where we need to get to. We need to get to a place where we're learning and we're continuously learning. And I just want to end by saying this is a journey. No one's perfect, but we must create that psychological safety, that environment where we can share ideas, where innovation thrives, where creativity thrives. And that's only done if we value our differences, if we understand that we're all bringing a different perspective, because that's how true and new ideas are born. Thank you.